Okay, so I've been throwing words around like positivists, post-positivists and all that sort of stuff. Let's actually get into this. I've actually got questions written on the bottom of this slide because this is like the hardest, most abstract concept I ask you to do in this unit. So the reason why I've got questions there is if I'm saying something and your brain is going, I have no idea what's going on right now, put your hand up and ask me. Okay, so stay with me on this slide. There's only one slide in this section. All right, positivists. I've been banging on about that. They're our natural scientists. Okay, the positivists are all about this experiment. You know, I've got this hypothesis. Can I drop this apple? Will it still fall? I'm going to have an apple. I'm going to measure it, the distance. Okay, I dropped it. It fell this fast. Okay, theory, gravity still exists. All right, that's your positivists. Your post-positivists. So the ontology for positivists, the ontology is that truth exists and it's singular. So there's one truth. It exists and it can be found. Okay? So they are in this whole camp of one truth, it exists, can be found. That's what they're on about. Post-positivists, they say, look, there's one truth, but it's murky and it's going to take us time and we're just going to keep kind of getting it wrong a bit. So there is only one truth, but we might not actually get a chance to get to know what it is. Guys, you can't sit on the floor. Sorry. You need to sit on a chair. So they're all about, so their ontology is truth still there, but, you know, we can't maybe find it. All right? Interpretivism. Interpretivism is about how we interpret the world around us. So this is a school of thought around there that it's all open to interpretation and my interpretation is just as valid as your interpretation. Okay? This is starting to sound, if you're those of you who are postmodernists, this might be sounding a bit postmodern, but it's not quite. If you need a chair, there's a chair down here. Let's go. No one's allowed to sit on the floor, otherwise the University of Canberra will sack me. Maybe I shouldn't have said that if this is going on to YouTube. Anyway, I've got de Saussure up there. Now, de Saussure was a linguist. I'm rather fond of de Saussure. He came up with the idea of the signifier and the signified. Okay, and this is a great example of interpretivism. So for him, he was like, everything is a sign. So a word is a sign. An image is a sign. So he called them signs. And he said that every sign was divided into the signifier and the signified. Okay? His big example, and there's a really cute little video on YouTube if you want to go rummaging around for it, is about cat. So when I say the word cat, in each of your minds you now have a cat. Okay? But you all know that C-A-T is how we spell cat. You know that when I say cat, you know what a C sounds like, you know what an A sounds like and what a T sounds like. So you know what the word sounds like. So we all agree on the signifier. We all agree how we spell cat. We all agree on how it sounds. What we don't agree on and what we interpret is the signified. Because your cat is going to be completely different from another person's cat. Some of you will be thinking of a black cat, some of you will be thinking of a white cat, tabbies. So his argument was meaning is always interpreted by the person because you can never agree on what it is. So he worked hard and actually coming up with frameworks and structuralism and then talked about how those structures actually work and how we work through the signifiers, the structures of language and the structures of he was actually into phonetics, so he was into how language works verbally and how we understood that and how we engage with it. And it's those structures that actually enable us to communicate and have agreed meaning. But we always had to account for the fact that we agree on what the meaning is, but the meaning's still not quite right. So we're interpreting it. All right? Cool little guy. I really like his work. Constructionism. Okay. Constructionism is all about how we construct meaning in society. So I've got Weber up here, another cool dude. Really interesting stuff. If you're doing politics at all, I really highly recommend Weber. He does some really interesting stuff about social action and bureaucracies. Really interesting stuff. But it's the idea here that in society we will have an agreed meaning. So we agree what university education is as a society. So we have this idea of what an ideal university is, and we'll all construct what that ideal looks like, and we'll all agree on it together. But Weber also argues that individuals will construct their own meaning. So in a Weber framework or Weberian framework, you'll actually have the meaning created by the individual, but also the meaning that's created by society. So you've got two types of meaning in there. But Weber also talks about how meaning comes through action. So he talks about the fact that you actually don't say, when you're doing your research, you actually don't look at what people are necessarily saying what they think. You look at what they're doing and the social action involved in that. So, for example, if a politician says something, there's a social action in that. There's an agreement that that politician is saying something for a particular reason, particular, meaning, and then it's up to you to look at how that's constructed. Okay? I'm using Weber in my thesis, so I will stop now, or otherwise I will just keep talking about it. Okay, pragmatism. Pragmatism is a fancy way of saying everybody. You may have heard of something called grounded theory. It's a popular thing at the moment. And basically, grounded theory means that you have your research problem, and then as a social scientist, you say, I don't care about a framework, I'm just going to start researching, I'm just going to do something. And then eventually you start to draw on a range of theorists. Okay? So there's this concept that, and you're not allowed to look at theory before you actually start doing your research if you're doing grounded theory, because you actually sort of build your own little theory based on your own research. It's quite advanced and quite difficult to do, because you have to then justify your credibility based on your own research, and if you're a new researcher, you've got no credibility, so how do you prove your credibility? By making up your own research. So it's a little bit murky, pragmatism. I actually have bypassed this in my thesis a little bit because I'm actually using Weber, Laclau and Plato. So I've drawn on three theorists. Now that's not pragmatism, that's something quite different, but it does mean I'm playing in a little bit of theory, and that's a problem as well because I'm mixing theories, but we'll get into that. Okay, now I've got the post, so this is postmodern and post-structural. Is there anyone who's passionate about postmodernism in here? Yeah, some people are quite passionate about it these days. No? Good. So postmodernism and post-structuralism, I think, are greatly misunderstood frameworks. Greatly misunderstood. For a whole range of reasons. Basically because of social scientists. I'm not going to lie. So postmodernism went through this phase where social scientists and literature people and a whole range of things gave postmodernism a bad name because it was kind of like, well, everything means everything and everything means nothing, so it's all nothing. It was very nihilistic, so it was very nothingness. So you could have your opinion on anything you wanted and that was okay, even if you were completely wrong, and that would be completely validated by your research. Yeah? So you could go out there and say the whole water system in the ACT is actually Coca-Cola, and a postmodernism would go, that's okay because that's your truth. Okay? We're kind of past that now, and postmodernism relates to modernity, so the Industrial Revolution. Post-structuralism implies to structures in society. So the fact that you guys walk in here, sit down, get out your laptop, start taking notes, that's a structure. That's an education structure that you're sitting in. Okay? And a post-structuralist would say, well, why do you do that? Why don't you sit on the floor? Well, you don't sit on the floor because the lecturer keeps yelling at you not to sit on the floor. Because she got an email that said we're going to sack you if you make people sit. all right? So, but there's this questioning of the structures that we exist in, and that's post-structuralism. This is Leclerc. He did some work with a woman called Moof. I always forget first names, I'm sorry. Let's say Leclerc and Moof came up with this really, they were kind of the leaders of post-Marxism stuff, if you're into this sort of stuff, and started questioning basically hegemony and power structures and how power structures exist in society and why is one more dominant than the other. So, you can look at power structures in all sorts of different ways, and it is a lot of modern social research goes into this. So feminist theory can fall into postmodernism, post-structuralism, but it mostly falls into criticalist. But this is where the lines get murky, and by the end of this lecture you'll actually understand, and I've probably been talking too long on this. So then we get into the criticalists. So this is usually feminist theory, or Marx is a good example of this. And basically this is the idea that your research is critiquing something in society. So Marx critiqued where the ownership of oh my God, mental blank. Ownership of production. Oh, thanks for rescuing me, guys. Really appreciate that. When the mind goes blank, that's when one of you needs to say, oh, Mel, you idiot, right? So Marx questioned the ownership of production. So who owns production and why, right? That was what he was questioning initially. Okay, Foucault's another criticalist, but Foucault also sometimes falls into the postmodernists. Big on, power and things like that. I'm throwing these names out because you may be aware of some of them. If at this point you're going, I have no idea what you're talking about, that's cool, okay? But there's nothing worse than when you go to a party somewhere and you're drinking your red wine and someone goes, oh, have you read Foucault? And it's like, no. Sorry, I don't think a lot of Foucault. Sorry, this is descended somewhere. Anyway, so these are the paradigms. These are kind of the conceptual frameworks in which you're allowed to play. These frameworks give you credibility. So if you say to someone, I'm doing a post-structural thesis or I'm doing post-structural research, they know exactly what type of question you're going to have, what type of research you're doing, and what type of answer you're going to get, even though they have no idea what you're actually doing, because they know what post-structuralism is. I'm doing a constructivist research. Okay, then bang. Even though they don't know what you're doing, they know the type of question you're going to have, the type of research you're going to do, because they know what box you're fitting in. Yep. Any questions? Okay, so did either of this go went much better than I thought it was going to? Or yes, great. Because it's about, one's interpreting, you are entitled to how you interpret your world, and in my research I recognise your interpretation will be different from my interpretation, and that I may never know what your interpretation is. But construction means we construct together. So I will continue to talk to you until we agree on whether or not this is a water bottle or whether it's a beverage holder or whether it's a... So we'll continue to talk about it until we agree. So construction is about how we construct. How have we built that? Interpret is about how you personally perceive and understand. Nice question.
Can the paradigms ever be mixed?
Yeah, okay. I hope so, because my thesis does. Yeah, but it's really tricky. You can mix paradigms, but you'll see why it becomes a bit of a bitch in a minute. I mean, a bit tricky in a minute.